I see that the door is wide open, obviously been broken. And then I see this unknown person standing in my house, a good 6-10 feet inside of my house. That's when I take the gun, I point my gun straight at them, and I tell them to get out of my house. Then he continued to advance towards me, and then that's when I started to shoot.
Listen, gang, Lucky Gunner has both fantastic content and great prices on ammo. Enjoy the convenience of online purchase and crazy fast shipping. Experience why Lucky Gunner is one of our favorite spots on the Gunternet. Go to get-ass.com/Lucky Gunner. And while you're there, check out MagTech Ammunition. MagTech is the exclusive range ammo for the Active Self-Protection team, and we are grateful for their commitment to quality and support. You can buy MagTech ammo at the Lucky Gunner link. Remember to tell them both that the ASP Podcast sent you. All right, folks, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, your favorite former Fed. With us today, John Daub. We were just discussing the pronunciation of John Daub's last name, and it is John Daub, apparently. I don't know how that could be in doubt. D-A-U-B, pretty simple. John, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on, Mike.
I appreciate it. Just to, I hate to say trigger warning, but this episode does involve a bad outcome. Not that John did anything wrong, but it involves a bad outcome with a autistic adult male. So if that's something that you think you want to tune out for, I completely respect that. And tune in next week for something different. John, what part of the country are you in?
I am presently living in Bryan, Texas. That's Bryan. For people who don't know, Bryan College Station is home of Texas A&M University and all that Aggie land. I came down to Texas in '94 to go to grad school at A&M, and then met my wife. I got married, moved to Austin, lived there for 25 years because, Austin nerd jobs and stuff like that. Lived there, raised a family and all that stuff. And about a year ago, we got tired of Austin, and we finally pulled up stakes and decided to come back to Aggie land. So that's where we are. So Central Texas area.
So you say, you say nerd work. What kind of work did you do?
So, well, in my main day job that I end up doing is that I've been a professional software developer for the past 25 years or so. I've been a principal architect for a number of years here with a consultancy. And just a few months ago, actually took a promotion up to being a director of technology. So now I just help to sit in meetings all day long and help to run the show and everything. So,
did you grow up in Texas?
No, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and then it was probably about when I was in third grade or so. My father actually became a member of the U.S. House of Representatives and all that. And so then we moved. This would be about 1980 or so. We moved out to Washington D.C. So I pretty much grew up. Northern Virginia area outside of Washington, D.C., went to, middle school, grade school, middle school, high school there, went to undergrad at James Madison University. That's also out in Virginia. And then, and so that's where I spent most of my time growing up, was there over on the East Coast.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland. Fun fact. So we
fantastic.
We were practically neighbors. So let me ask you, this incident, which is, I said earlier, is, it's nothing to celebrate, nothing to jump up and down about, but an unfortunate result. Prior to this happening, did you have a firearms training? Were you in the firearms world, the self-defense world, Second Amendment world?
Just a little bit. So, like I said, that my day job is doing the software development thing, but then my other job, or my other main thing that I do with my life, is that for about the past 13 years, I have been I guess my title is a senior lead assistant instructor with KR Training. KR Training is Carl Wren's group down here in Central Texas. And I've been with him now, like I said, teaching for 13 years with all that. I also, just for a little bit of training resume, I'm a range master, certified master instructor. As a matter of fact, I was in the first range master instructor class back in November 2019, and John Correa was also in that class as well. We had a great time being on the line together throughout that whole weekend. And actually, John even took us out to as a minor thing, we went and saw the band Warrant that night, and there's a whole story behind that, but that's a story for another day. It was a pretty cool thing. Yeah. It was a fun time.
So you were in proximity to John Correa for a number of days. Did you check your wallet, your watch, make sure everything was still on you, cell phone, you didn't lose anything?
As far as I know, everything was there, but he did definitely spend a whole lot of time with his brass just ejecting into my face the entire weekend. So I'll take offense at that, at least.
Yeah, that's something he's good for sure.
But anyways, but all that kind of stuff to say that, So I've been doing that, the mini master instructor. I've been about 1,000 hours or so at this point of various training in this field in this area and so forth, and a number of other certifications: a support science analyst, Masada U Group deadly force instructor, a whole bunch of other things that play into all this. So I've had a little bit of training. Yes.
We were at the conference recently, and John was talking to all the attendees, and we were discussing training, and he brought up the fact that they were getting training, period. I mean, never mind a weekend of outstanding training from top-notch instructors. The fact that they were doing any training at all puts them in the 1% of all gun owners in the United States. And I didn't know that before he said that. At the time this happened, you were in the Austin area?
Yes.
Okay.
It was January 5th, 2015. And so we were definitely still living in Austin. Yes.
Okay. And just to get to the point of the matter, an adult male, 25, I think.
I don't know.
He was early.
I don't know what his age was.
All right, early 20s. Got out of a group home that was nearby where John lives, and was banging on doors and forced his way in, forced entry through John's front door. John warned him he was armed, not to come in, and the guy came in, and John was forced to shoot him, and the person did not make it. He did not survive that shooting. The home, I think there's some question about the group home and their licensing. Do you know anything about that or no?
So before we go too deep in this, there's two things that I want to just preface all this with. The first is that, like I said, this happened January 5th, 2015. So this is almost 7 years ago about when it happened. So if it's, like many things, as time passes, memory can fade on things. So if I forget something, or if I maybe get something a little bit wrong or something like that, I apologize. It's just, there's time, and that's what happens. The other thing that I also just want to state out of this whole thing is that, as you said in the beginning, this is just a kind of a bad outcome situation. This is just a sad and tragic situation that happened. But the thing is that I don't talk about it to celebrate it or say, look how cool I am or how great it is. It's absolutely not that. It's simply that there are things here that we can learn. And so I hope that through this, that we can learn this. And so, I would ask anybody listening to make sure that they just, are respectful to all the people involved, including the deceased and the deceased family, because, this is just a sad thing that happened to everybody. So with all that out of the way, back to your question about the facility. If I remember correctly, the facility ended up had actually a record of problems. It was known for having the Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services had investigated them. They had numerous problems. And in the end, ultimately, they did have their license. Well, what ended up happening in the end was they gave up their license, which is basically, either which way, I'm pretty sure that the department was going to revoke it, but it probably worked out better for them and their business and their insurance and their whatever for them to voluntarily surrender as opposed to getting it revoked, but either which way, yeah, they ended up getting shut down after all this, or just that particular home did. The main parent company is certainly still in business.
So it was after this event that they
Yes.
Surrendered their license to operate.
Yes, correct.
So prior to all this going down, were you aware of the presence of this place?
Yes, we were aware of it. We always knew that the house was there. And what we would do is we would see people on occasion that would and the way we'd see people on occasion would be like, sometimes they would take everybody out and everybody would go for a walk. And so you'd see all the residents would come out. They'd be they'd all be holding hands, and they would go for a walk around the neighborhood. So we definitely, knew that they were there. We knew that it was not like just a single family home kind of living situation. We did also know about it because at various times we would see situations that occurred. I remember one day distinctly coming home, and I parked in the driveway, and I look over and I see across the street that there is a naked man up against a car and two police officers talking with him. Mm-hmm. And it was, given that it was obviously happening right in front of the house, I was reason to believe that this was, since I also then knew all the other neighbors in the area, that it was not one of the other neighbors, that it had to be a resident of that house. There was also a time, I remember as well, that there was another person, there was an individual, and it actually, as we later found out, it was this same person that was basically that there was it was a big ruckus that was going on out in the street. And I remember that there was APD, Austin Police Department, was there, and they were working on trying to get him into the back of the car. And as again later found out, that they were taking him to, I think, a local hospital for evaluation or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was the sort of thing where actually even at the time, my one of my children was across the street, actually at the home that was next to this home, and was babysitting. And we were, with the whole ruckus going on and the police and all that, it's like she needed to come home. And our neighbor called us and was like, how do we do this? And we just said, to just sit there and just wait, obviously, until all this is done. But we've certainly had a number of things like that. So we were aware of them. We were aware that there were issues there. And the thing, though, that actually happened was we lived in this house for 18 years. And in the early years, everything was very fine. It was just in the later years that things got different, because we would notice we wouldn't see the family, like the residents going out and going for walks. We wouldn't see them coming out. We wouldn't see them doing things. And they got very, very quiet. And, they didn't necessarily mingle with the neighborhood, and the neighborhood, I think on occasion, like, the kids would go trick or treating and want to ring the bell. And many times the front porch light would be off, saying not to come in or not to come over. But sometimes it would be on, and, they would answer the door and things like that. But over time, it got to a point where things got very quiet over there, and there was less interaction and less awareness of like what was happening over there. And so I have no idea what to attribute that to, but we did know that, like I said, we knew it was there, but I could see how over time something changed.
At any point in the time the group home was there, did the management or the staff there make any outreach to the community, say, hey, this is what we're doing over here, and you might see this, you might see that. Here's how to deal with it. You might have someone, somebody disrobe running across the lawn or whatever, sort of things that might go down. Was there any kind of outreach to the neighborhood from this group home in your recollection?
I do not recall ever having that in all my time there. And, when I was pretty close with a number of neighbors, and I don't recall them ever saying that, oh, yeah, we got something. They came to talk to us. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, we didn't. Nothing like that. So as far as I know, they pretty much always kept to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not accusing them of anything, but it seems like it might be a good idea to get to know your neighbors and kind of give them a heads up as to what might go on or what might happen, to prepare them, because, that's just something that it's probably an eventuality. The fact that, the fact that someone can get out at all unauthorized is a pretty big red flag, and that would make a lot of sense why they wouldn't stay licensed for very long or something like that.
Yeah, and there were, I went in preparing here for the podcast here. I had tried to go back and see if I could find some of the information, the reports on all that, and links had expired and stuff like that. But I just remember that they had I think a dozen or two various violations when the Texas Department came in to look at everything. There were just all sorts of problems that they had. So.
Yeah, and not for nothing, but if you do have a family member in any kind of a institution or facility, whether it's a home for older people, people with Alzheimer's, people with autism, whatever the case may be, it really is incumbent upon you to do your diligence, to read reviews, to check the licensing, to do a spot check, pop in every so often and make sure things are being run the way they should be run. And if you get any resistance at the front desk, you can't come in right now because this or that, well, that's a red flag, and you need to, and as John was saying, check with the state and make sure their licensing is up to date, check for violations, all that sort of thing. Because if you're not there on a regular basis, you just don't know what's going on. And unfortunately, these places they don't tend to be, but there are plenty of instances of abuse and neglect that go on in these sorts of places. So just a word in that regard. John, had you encountered this young man previously, or seen him outside, or knew what he looked like? Or was this the first time you saw him was when he's beating down your front door?
Correct. Yeah, I had no idea who this person was at all when I saw them. Like I said, that one instance of, like I said, that there was a person outside and, AP was trying to get in the back of a patrol car. It turns out that was the same person. So theoretically, I guess I had seen them before, but there was no recollection or actual knowledge of who this person was at the time. No.
And about what time did this all begin, approximately?
About 6:15, 6:30 in the morning.
And how do you become aware of the fact that this person's beating on the door? You heard it? You heard someone yell, or what happened? Walk us through that.
What ended up happening was, this was January 5th. This was a Monday. This was just, after coming off of a couple weeks of vacation for Christmas and New Year's. And I was getting ready to go back to work. And so I did my usual. So I'm a early morning gym goer, and I had gotten up about probably 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning or so, and gone to the gym. The gym that I went to was only about a half mile from the house. So I just walked. And so I went, worked out, walked back home. And even though it was, January and it's very, very cold outside, I was still, of course, very hot, sweaty and everything, having, sweats and all that stuff on. And so when I got home, I stripped down to just my underwear and my gym shorts so I could cool off, took the dog out back for her, morning, what dogs do. And then we came back in the house and encountered my wife, and she just got up. And so, having the morning coffee and chit chat about everything. And then I said, okay, well, it's time for me to get going here, get showered and get ready to actually go to work and everything. And that was about 6:15 or so. And so from there, I went to our master bathroom. So the master bathroom is towards the front of the house. And so it's towards the front of the house. And then just actually to back up a minute to give a little geography of how this all looks. So our house is on a street, and then right across the street, like you could almost have gone like out my driveway and then right up into this small little cul-de-sac. So it's right across, and that's a little cul-de-sac, and up in the cul-de-sac at, I'd say, like, if my house is at 6 o'clock, if you will, the group home was at about 10 or 11 o'clock or so, if you will. And so then there's that. So there's where the house is, that's where the home is, that's where my house is, essentially across the street from each other. And then there's street. And so the bathroom then is up at the front of the house, towards that street area. So what happens? So I go into the bathroom and I go sit on the toilet. And that puts me, the toilet is of course even closer to that front wall of it's literally up against the wall that then goes into the garage and then out to the street. And so I'm just sitting there and I'm just doing what any modern person does when they're on the toilet. You're scrolling on your phone. And what I start hearing is I'm hearing outside. I start hearing these noises. There's like yelling. I can't make out what's being yelled. I can't make out if it's just one person or two people yelling, but it's yelling. And that immediately, perks up your radar here, because quiet neighborhood usually. It's also, whatever, 6:15, 6:30, whatever in the morning.
Sure.
Nobody making noise. This is highly unusual to have happen. And so that's how I first ended up hearing it. Was I hear this noise out there. And my wife was back in the dining room, just, finishing her coffee and her morning readings. And I'm going to yell out to her just to say, hey, do you hear, what is that? Do you hear what that is? Kind of thing. But it's then at that point where this is the point where then everything changes. Because what I hear, I never get anything. I never get to say anything out to her. All I hear is I hear my wife yelling for me. And there is this sheer mortal terror in her voice. At the time, we had been married 19 years. And in all those years, I had never heard anything like this from her. But obviously, I know her well enough to know, all the little inflections and intonations of what things are going to mean.
Yeah. And
she's telling me, basically, she's saying that there was somebody at the door. And so that was really the first indication for me. Now, the thing is about this, it's actually kind of interesting that, so that's the big cue to me. It's like, I'm hearing this, my wife this, and that's my cue that something is wrong and I need to respond. So I get off the toilet, put my phone into my pocket, which I didn't necessarily think about doing. I just did. And so since I had gone to the gym, I had put my bag down, which had my gun in it, and I had put that down on the bed. And so I get off, I go run, go grab my bag, I get the gun out of the bag, and then I start, shooting out the bedroom, shooting down the hallway, and to come around. The only thing that I heard, apart from hearing that first initial, yelling and noises outside, and then hearing my wife, that's all I heard. I never heard the door. I never heard the door being, broken through or anything. My wife and my daughter later said that it just sounded like an explosion. My wife even said that even before the door came open, she heard like there was something on the other side of the door making like animalistic kind of howling noises, and she's like, a coyote, because we've got coyotes around our house, but she's quickly dismissed that. And she said the door was literally like aggressively being shaken and rattled, and then next thing you know, the door is blown in, and all this. And she didn't see it. She heard this because she's hightailing it to try to, run back to the bedroom. And then I'm coming around this. So, auditory exclusion, it's very real.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard the door. I never heard the rattling. I never heard any of that. But then as I shoot down the hallway and come back around, that's when then I come around and I see that the door is wide open. I see that it's obviously been broken. And then I see this unknown person standing in my house, a good 6-10 feet inside of my house. I have no idea who they are. And there they are standing there. And then that's when I take the gun, I point my gun straight at them, and I tell them to get out of my house. And I repeat, get out of my house, get out of my house, get out of my house. Everybody else later told me, no, Dad, you said get the F out of the house. I have no recollection that I swore, but apparently I did. But I said, get out of my house, get out of my house, get out of my house. Then he continued to advance towards me, and seeing all that. And then that's when I started to shoot. And then I observed that then they were turning to then walk out the door. And so I saw that they were leaving. I stopped shooting, and then they collapsed just outside the door onto the front patio.
About how big a person was this?
To me, when I saw them, they were, to me, the assessment I had at the time was they were big. I just saw this very large person in front of me. And I can't give you measurements of height and weight or anything like that. But the one thing that I even remember is after this had happened, in media interviews, the family was interviewed and they described him as a gentle giant and all that. So if his own family and loved ones are describing him as a giant, you could, pretty much guess that this person was of large size.
Yeah, you could infer that. So now, at the moment you were confronted with this person, did you know where the rest of your family was in the house?
When I blew down the hallway, I knew that I blew by 2 people. And at the time, there was no hard identification of the people. But, William April, the late, wonderful William April, talked about the concept of thin slicing. And through that, that's what basically happened to me, that I had enough information as I went down that I'm like, I knew that the people that I blew by were my wife and my daughter. And I was just, I could know that. And beyond that, the only thing that I knew, I didn't have necessarily conscious awareness at the time of where my sons were, but I knew they hadn't woken up yet. And so they were still upstairs in their room.
So there you are with this person, I assume around the threshold of your door or on the front steps.
They were inside. They were clearly inside the house.
When he collapsed, he was still inside the home.
Oh, well, no. Oh, after he collapsed, yeah, it was right on the threshold of the door. Yes.
Okay. What's going through your mind at this point?
At that point, when that happened, what I'm thinking is that we're getting robbed. I'm thinking that, well, gosh, someone's coming in and they're trying to rob us or something like that. And my first concern was, And what if, if dude has friends outside in car, whatever, they just heard, the gunfire, they just see their friend, whatever, like that. Are they going to be coming in or doing something? So my first immediate thought was falling back as far as I could, away from the door and away from everything, such that I could still see the door and I could still see what was happening, but I could get back as far as I possibly could to get away and create all the distance that I possibly could, and then call 911. And so I'm yelling that out. I'm trying to, I don't know how the alarm on the house got activated, if it was because when he came through or because was able to hit the panic buttons. All I know is that next thing I know, it's like, it didn't seem like it was working, but yet I'm hearing the siren going off, so somehow it became activated. And then I, of course, had my phone out and I'm calling 911 as well, to talk, and try to get, APD to show up as quickly as possible and to report the whole thing.
Do you remember, I mean, this is probably unlikely, but do you remember what you said, how you phrased what you were saying to the police dispatcher? Because that's something that I think is critically important to convey what exactly is going on, and not just, I just shot someone and hang up.
I don't remember exactly what it is that I said. I like, in other words, I can't recount to you the exact words on it, but I know that it was in the lines of that, that I needed police, and that someone had just broke into my house, and that I had shot them. So we needed police, and then yes, EMS. I also remember this in talking to them. Things that really stood out to me about the 911 call were that, one, there was a lot of transferring. A lot of transfer to these people, transfer to these people, transfer to these people, transfer to these people, a lot of transfer, and a lot of repeating your address and repeating your stuff and repeating your information. A lot had to happen, a whole lot. There were also two things. That, one, the dispatcher did ask me to go and approach them and check on them, and my answer was no. And then now I understand kind of like, why they did that. And the other thing that they also did was that they kept saying, okay, where is the gun? I said, it is in my hand. And they said, you need to put the gun down. And I said, I will when the police arrive. Because I had no idea, obviously, what was going on and what further things. Now, again, I completely understand why they said these things, to put the gun down and to do all that. I totally get it. And I also accept that the dispatcher is not there. They can't see anything. They're trying to help keep you calm, bring some order to the chaos while things are happening. And I am not, there's no upsetness at the dispatcher for doing what they did. But I understood why. And I said, as soon as I start seeing, blue and red lights flashing outside the house, I will put the gun down. I will put my hands up and I will do all the right things. But I guess the one thing that I'll just reiterate is, like, the dispatcher is not there, and they don't know what's going on. They mean well, but you're the one who's there. You're the one who can assess things, and you don't have to blindly just do what they say. You need to use your good judgment of what you still see before you and what's going on before you. Understand why they're saying it, understand what's going on, but realize that just blindly just doing what they say, like, approach the person. No. That kind of stuff. I would just recommend people, like, just know you're there, what's going on best. Use that and let that guide you more than just what you hear coming in over the phone.
Engaging your brain is so critical, and I think some people do tend to, the police are telling me to do a thing, I should do a thing. I think you did the right thing. I would not have moved up on that guy to check on him. That's not your job. And right. As far as putting the gun away, I think you used your best judgment, and I think you did the right thing.
Again, remember, like you said, what was going through my mind at the time? I thought that we were being, like, robbed or worse or something like that. I had no idea who this person was. I had no idea the context and situation. That's all I knew. And especially knowing that it's like, when you give somebody the universal sign to go away, of a gun pointed at their chest, and you give them the option of telling them, what to do, and what you get in response is advancement, what else can you start to think, right? And so you have to, and given that that's all the information that you have to go on, it's we just got to be mindful of that. We got to take that all into account as we're thinking about this and working through. You know what I mean?
About
So,
how
anyways,
long did it take for the police to arrive, if you can remember?
I don't remember exact. Of course, it felt like forever, right? But here's the interesting thing about it. They, relatively speaking, they arrived quickly. But I think the reason they arrived quickly, it is my understanding that what happened was that this gentleman had gotten out of the house, and for whatever reason, instead of going back to the house, ended up going around the cul-de-sac, like around the clock, if you will, 12, 1, 2, 3, to all the other houses along that area, and was banging and rattling on all of their doors. And so I just was, next in the clock, and I'm the one who just got the golden ticket of their door, coming apart and him coming through it. And so other neighbors had already been, aroused and woken up by their doors being shaken,
Sure.
and they had already called the police. So police were already en route, as far as I'm aware. That is my understanding. So that's one reason why it seems that they did arrive quickly, based on what I was told, is just that, the perception is they arrived quicker than what you'd think, simply because they were already en route for another reason.
Yeah, I don't know what the shifts are like with APD, but frequently 6 a.m. is the start of a new shift. So they're in roll call, they're getting their equipment together, they're not on the road yet. And I don't know how far away the police station is, but that probably had some effect on their response time. So the police arrive. Walk us through that.
So police arrive. I made myself very, well known. Gun was down, hands were up, palms visible, and all this, making it very clear that I am the homeowner. And this is me. I am the homeowner, and all this. They could obviously see, since they had to come in through the front door, and that's, where everything was. They then immediately began, administering CPR and all this kind of, first aid. And also, when they came in, what they told me basically to do was, so right around in that area from the foyer, then, or stairs to go up. And they basically just told me, here, you sit here. And so they sat me down there. They got the rest of my family over into further deeper back into the master bedroom. They kept us apart. And then they had a couple officers basically standing near me to just keep the watch on me. And then everything just, they did all the things that they needed to do. I wasn't allowed to get up while they looked at everything and tried to manage everything. One thing that they kept asking me was, how many shots did you fire? And my response was, I don't know, because I honestly didn't know. But they kept insisting on trying to get the answer out of me. And all I said to them, I had to just tell them, is like, I honestly don't know, but I'll tell you that gun right there holds 12 plus 1. So you can do the math.
And where is the gun as all this is going on? Had they secured it? Had they cleared it? What, they just left it where it was?
I left the gun. I had set the gun down on the dining room table, which was in eye shot of where I was sitting on the stairs. And then that's where I had left it. And yes, I pointed it out to them. And then, they had cleared it, and then pretty much left it there until they needed to deal with it, because every single officer just, walking by kept asking and wanting to see and wanting to do. I have no idea who they all were in relation to why, every single one of them thought it was relevant, but nevertheless they did.
Yeah, it's really not relevant, actually. I mean, it might be down the road, but and most cops who get into a shooting couldn't tell you how many rounds they fired. If it was more than one or two,
no,
you lose track. So
yeah, between
the time you call 911 and the police arriving, you stayed put in one spot. Are you communicating with your wife and kids at all? Because they heard all this ruckus and gunfire. Are they yelling? Are you okay? Or what's going on there?
Gosh, that I have to think a bit, because that's actually that's a question that I don't think anyone's ever asked. So I have to think a minute and think back to that. I do think that there was at least questions of locating everybody and is everybody okay? Because my wife was definitely in the other room and couldn't see. Nobody else saw what happened and all that. And so they, I believe nobody else saw. That's another remember. But anyways, point is, my wife certainly didn't. So of course she hears gunfire and all this stuff, and she doesn't know then sort of, am I shot or whatever. So I do believe that there was some communication to at least confirm those things and about, I do remember like hollering, call 911, call 911, call 911 and all that. But I don't recall much other communication, I think, beyond that. There may have been, but I don't recall.
Yeah, gang, if you haven't heard gunfire outside of a range environment without hearing protection, I have. It's extremely loud. It's extremely jarring, and it's very,
Yes.
very unpleasant. So at some point, were you taken to a police station? And at what point did you, let me ask you this, let me back up.
Yes.
Did you have any kind of firearms? Like we're sponsored by Firearms Legal Protection. Did you have anything like that at the time?
Yeah. I am a member of ACLDN, Armed Citizen Legal Defense Network, and all that. And so, I had eventually was able to put in a call to Marty Hayes through the network's hotline number. And Marty got in touch with an attorney in Austin that was affiliated with the network. And then his name was Gene Anthus. And Gene then came out and, took on everything and all that. Yes.
Walk us through right after are you taken to a police station, or they try to question you in your home, or what went down there? Because I think a lot of people are going to be curious as to how that might happen post shooting.
So eventually, after a while, when everything kind of got cleared up and so forth, they did take me down. They took myself and they took my family down to the actual headquarters downtown, as opposed to one of the satellite stations, to give statements about everything. And so we did do that. And it's one of these interesting things looking back. People will be like, well, you should wait at least 72 hours or whatever, 48, 72 hours before you give any kind of statement and all this. The thing that's really interesting about all this is that I certainly look back on this, and I don't recommend that people do this. But the very interesting thing about this whole thing was, while it was certainly very physically stressful, it was very interesting because I had drawn my line a long time ago. I knew what that line was of, what is worth dying for, what is worth dealing with. And this certainly had, very clearly crossed that line. And things were actually very clear. Things weren't necessarily muddled or whatever. And so like I said, I wouldn't recommend, and some people will probably, shake their head at what I did. But that's what I did do. And that's what did happen, in terms of then, giving a statement just, later that day, beyond that. So, but we did do that. The one thing that I would say that was also very interesting in terms of what happened with this is not only they did do a lot of examination of me at the still at my home and in the area before we went anywhere. Like as an example. So again, one of the reasons I pointed out that I had one of the reasons I pointed out that I was literally just in my gym shorts was that I was still in my gym shorts and the door was wide open and I was pretty darn cold. And so eventually when I had to leave, they wouldn't let me necessarily, put on warmer clothing per se, but I was able to put on a coat, and the only shoes that I could get were my boots that had just been out in the field when I had gone deer hunting. And therefore the boots had blood on them. And so they then took and wanted to take samples and swabs of all of that, which was completely understandable. But they did that. They took pictures of the whole house, all the interior. It was actually very interesting. People may find interesting if they want to know what things you may go through. They will look at everything and they will take pictures of everything that may be interesting. At my bedside table, I had a number of books because I read about these things and self-defense and things like that. And they took pictures of all of those. I had just a little cup with change and things in it. And I had a couple like souvenir rifle shells in there from things, and they made sure they took pictures of those as evidence and such. So uh, they they even took pictures of the toilet that I did not flush, because again, for whatever reason, they wanted that for I don't know, for story corroboration or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly what they wanted it for. Because down the road, they're not going to be able to remember all this stuff. So the pictures are a huge. I speak from experience.
Mhm.
Pictures are a huge help. Did you feel at any point that the questions being asked of you by whomever, was it a detective or an officer, that they were pointed,
Detective.
or that they suspected you were overzealous, or any sort of accusatory language during that interview?
I don't have any recollection of feeling like they were trying to get at anything other than we're just trying to get the facts and we're just trying to get information about what went on. I never felt I actually just I think that APD did a very professional and a very good job at handling all of this. Um, so I mean I have nothing but really compliments for how they handled the whole thing, how they treated myself and my family, and especially really, actually I want to give a if by chance she's listening, I forgot her name, but she was the lady who was like the crisis counselor for APD, and she came out and was actually extremely wonderful at supporting my daughter, who's obviously had it was a little rough for her obviously to go through.
So, John, how long do you think you were at the police station that day, if you had to guess?
A couple hours.
So you get home, it's like midday, mid afternoon, plus or minus.
Yeah, it's late afternoon, mid late afternoon.
And now you're walking back into what was a crime scene a few hours ago. I had another guest recently who was a victim in her own home. Came home from a walk with her friend, and there was a crazy guy in her house, and he stabbed her a bunch of times.
Mm.
She went to the hospital, went through a bunch of surgery. She came home sometime later, walking back into the house. She wasn't expecting this. That house wasn't the same place it was before the incident. So what are you greeted with when you get back home that afternoon?
Oh, well, so they still had the roads blocked off, and bless those officers who were still there and had been there through almost the entirety of the thing. And they even told me, it's like, yeah, I really like to go because I really like to go pee. So bless them for their fortitude and just doing this whole thing. But I come home and yeah, the door is still broken, and then there's still they had left, obviously the body had been removed, but all of the other parts of that, from the medical parts, when they try to administer first aid and such, wrappers and things from bandages and whatever were all still left on the front porch, and blood was still left over. It had dried, but blood was still everywhere. And so that was because you don't think about that, like this is a thing, and someone still has to clean all that up. And again, I really have to give a lot of I guess gratitude to the APD crisis counselor, because she had walked me back over and in, and she actually got down and helped me clean up. She didn't have to do that at all, but that was I guess very, very kind and very thoughtful, and I'm very appreciative of that. So, but that's the thing. And then had to get immediately on the phone to our handyman, the guy that we always used. Told him what happened, and he came over. And I won't go into this because this might be an interesting thing to talk about in a minute. He actually was a retired cop, and so it was actually interesting that we got to talk to him for a little while about this, and that was a big help in dealing with things. But what he did, he sent some people over immediately, and they nailed up the door so it would be secure overnight. And then they came immediately out, next day to work on repairing the door and getting this all back and going and all that. And I appreciate that they did that too. So
I had seen a picture of your door from the inside that Austin PD had released, and the force that was required to do that kind of damage to that door was a pretty solid wooden door. If I saw it correctly, it was a lot of force.
Yeah,
A lot of force and a
it's
lot
a
of
lot.
noise. After you leave the police station, do you have the sense that there will be some charges or liability looming, or what was your frame of mind at that point?
I was never arrested and never charged with anything. Is everything that I was led to? Well, one thing that was interesting was talking to my neighbor afterwards. Of course, he had gone up to one of the officers at the perimeter. I was like asking, at the time when this was happening, he said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they said, "It looks like that, someone broke in and then, they got shot." So APD was already very looking at it like this was very cleanly, that someone had broken in, and that this was, not a great thing to have happened, but in terms of just strictly speaking, of the law and so forth, that this was, if you will, kind of cut and dry. This was definitely a forced entry into the home. This was definitely someone had come into the home. This was definitely a situation like that. And there was, you could see that. And so I have to say, in terms of formal charges and such, or anything formal in the legal perspective, I wasn't necessarily concerned that, based on how the day had went and how the police were already talking, and my attorney was talking, I didn't necessarily expect there to be, at this point, anything, but we knew it was going to go in front of a grand jury, and so we would see what that would end up being. One thing that I do know later on, because I had used one of the city of Austin's crime viewer like maps on their website, and I had looked up our house just to see what it was listed, and it was actually listed as murder.
Not homicide, murder.
And that it was listed as murder. So that was, I got to tell you, when I saw that really hit me hard, that this whole thing was being investigated that way. And I was told that it was because, I could understand it was a homicide, sure, right? But it really hit me that it was that. And it's like, well, that's how they have, because of the nature of it, blah, 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 that's how they have to investigate it. I still don't really know what to think about that, but I have to say that, even still hearing that, I don't know.
Words have meaning, and I try to use my words very carefully. And so the difference between homicide and murder is that murder is a deliberate act, a premeditated act to take another human life without cause. And homicide is the taking of a human life for any reason or any motive whatsoever. Yeah, that had to be a very unpleasant feeling.
It was. And so, but I have to say that, the hard part on that legally was that I knew it was going to go in front of the grand jury. And it took, I think, how was it? When was this here? This would have been, it was in June 2nd, 2015. So, whatever, 5-6 months later there. That's when it went in front of the Travis County grand jury, and I was doing a true no bill in all that. So the thing, though, that really was interesting more for me was I wasn't so as concerned, oddly, I wasn't so concerned about the legal as I was concerned about the social, because it was the biggest news story of the day in Austin. Every news crew in town was there covering everything and wanting to know everything and snapping all the pictures and doing everything they could to get all this, because there's a million different angles that you can take with this story to drum up outrage and outrage clicks and all that kind of stuff that give them all that wonderful revenue, all at my expense, whether it's true or not. And I can even tell you right now that there was a lot of erroneous reporting. My favorite of which is when they reported that I have 3 daughters, and my 2 sons were quite surprised to learn that. And that's like such easily verifiable information, and none of that was done. So, what else out there when you read reports and when you hear news reports, I'm not saying that they're necessarily out to be deceptive, but when you have something simple as that, that's so easily verifiable and wasn't done.
I tell a story of making a simple arrest. It was an immigration charge from years ago. It was a gangbanger that I arrested, and I happened to arrest him half a block away from an elementary school. And the headline in the paper, it literally was a 5-minute encounter. I was like, "Hey, man, you remember me?" He's like, "Yeah, I remember you. All right, cool. Click, click, get in the car, off you go. He's going to be prosecuted for being a felon who'd re-entered the United States." The whole thing was 5 minutes, like I said. Days later in the newspaper, immigration sets up checkpoint outside of elementary school, and parents are afraid to go and walk their kids. They're afraid they'll be deported. The media is not your friend. Yeah. They're just not. I talked to Stephen Williford from Sutherland Springs. You probably heard of who he is. He's the one that interrupted the mass killing at a church. Fortunately for him, he had a friendly reporter. He had a young man that he'd worked with as a kid with firearms, so he had a friendly reporter to talk to. But they will absolutely create whatever narrative they want through whatever lens they see the world.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something interesting that happened was, so it so happened that this gentleman was black. I'm not black. I'm not white either, but I'm not black. And the thing that's interesting is, in 2015 there was the Texas legislature was in session. And someone had put forth, one of the legislators had put forth a bill about trying to repeal the stand your ground and castle doctrine laws, because obviously those are laws that are just secret code for license to kill black people with impunity, right? So what happened was, one day, while in between January and June, one day there's a knock at my front door, and I ask who it is, and it's a reporter from one of the local TV stations. And of course, I have zero interest in talking with them. And they said that what they wanted to do is they wanted to get my opinion on this piece of legislation.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, now, why in the world would they want my opinion when there's Mike Cox, who at the time was like the local rep for TSRA and NRA. There's and he's known to all the newsrooms, right? And then you have somebody like in Austin, Michael Cargill, who owns Central Texas Gun Works, and he's black and he's gay, and he's known to every single newsroom in Austin, is very happy to give them, sound bites and interviews and things like that. They all know who is available to them easily if they just want a random soundbite or random, what do gun people think of, this piece of legislation. So why are they coming and talking to me? Now I will say I said nothing. I just told the reporter, no, good day. And the reporter, actually, to their credit, was very apologetic, and you could tell by the tone of their voice they didn't want to be there. They obviously got told, go do this. So I'll give them at least this one reporter seemed to be a little bit human. But nevertheless, it's that point of, to me, and I even know, as this all had happened, I go back and I look and on social media, and already, the various anti-gun groups, you could find their Facebook pages. They were trying to make a stink out of all this. Now, again, some people were like, no, I don't think this is quite what we want. We need to back off of this one. But again, this is, and you could already see how people were commenting on the news stories, how they were coming out, and what people were saying, is that the court of public opinion is going to crucify you probably harder than anything else. So that was really what I was more worried and concerned about. And especially now that the internet is forever. And so this is forever something that's going to be there, documented, known. And again, the fact that I'm here talking about this, it's not necessarily a secret or anything, but it's always, people you apply for a job. Any good HR department is going to put your name into Google and see what comes up. And this kind of thing is going to come up. And I know I can't say for a fact, but a pretty darn good hunch that there was one place a few years ago that I was applying, and based on the awkwardness of their rejection of me right at the beginning, I'm pretty sure they Googled me and I did not fit what they wanted, which is fine. That's totally cool. I have no problems with it. But it's just, again, to say that these things are going to stick around with you forever. You will always have, if you will, that scarlet A on your chest.
That's why we do this show. I don't know anyone else that's doing this particular style of podcast, but the reason we're doing this is so that other people who might find themselves in your unfortunate position down the road can learn lessons from your incident. And I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about it. Now, the next thing I want to ask about, and if you don't want to talk about it, I totally understand. You went through a very traumatic event. After a traumatic event, people frequently suffer from post-traumatic stress. It's a real thing. I have it. I know.
Yes.
How did you and your family fare in that arena? Because, going back to that place where this awful thing just happened is not easy. But then down the road, it manifests itself in different ways. So did you struggle with that at all?
Myself and my family, we all went through it in our own way. We all had different things about it. Like, there's no question that, like, right in the immediate aftermath for, a number of months, little noises, even like, wrapping your fingers on the table, just that would make us jump. And little things like that. We would see, I remember one time, like, saw a little bit of like red nail polish on the table, and that just was like, took your breath away for just a moment. So, the thing that's interesting, like, and I'm not going to speak for any other, my other family members, I'll just speak for myself. The one thing that was interesting about all this was, like I said earlier, I had made the decision a long time ago where my line was. I was very clear and knew, like, if you cross this line, that is it. And it was a very, very high bar. If I could see that the life or of my wife or my children is in, obviously this kind of imminent jeopardy, and that's it, that I will go. I won't, the person at the convenience store or whatever, I know that I have this high responderness to me, but that's not something that necessarily crosses my threshold. But my wife and my kids, absolutely. And again, especially, like, I gave every opportunity. And so since I gave every opportunity, I knew everything, every possible situation, and I was basically pressed into this. In terms of sleep, I actually didn't lose much sleep at all, because it was already something there was not a doubt of myself. I mean, it was sad, right? I had to still deal with, the reality of what this was. It wasn't like a clean thing, like, yeah, some scumbag came in and, that was that, right? It was absolutely not that. But, like, I didn't lose any sleep. I lost 6 pounds of body weight in that day. And I knew that because I had been actually going through, like, I like lifting weights and, playing my weight and all that. And so I get on the scale all the time. I lost a clear 6 pounds of tissue, not just water weight or something, 6 pounds of tissue in one day because of the stress of the event and all that. And I actually attribute being, that I do, take care of my health and I work out and I do all this, having good physical health, I think went a long way towards being able to manage this situation and handle the stress of this situation well. The hardest thing for me, like that I dealt with in the aftermath, and even minor little tidbits just still today with things, even still, is what Masada Ayub called the mark of Cain. And it's just that, like, I remember very distinctly, we had to go out, like, this was the first big time of going out and doing some shopping after this, and had to buy a mattress, and they had to ask all of our information, our name and our address, also, so they could deliver the mattress. And I had just massive anxiety about wanting to tell them my name, because what if they recognize it and say, "Oh, you're that guy that did that thing," and what could, how would they act? How would they react to me? How would they handle that? And again, like I said, even to this day, like, it's not a major thing for me. I'm not losing sleep over it, but like I said, the internet's forever. And that's always a thing that I always have to think about. That's always there. That, if I, apply for a new job, what are people going to see? How are they going to think about this? So it's, that's probably been the hardest thing to have to deal with. But, I think the thing, like I said, that really helped was knowing very clearly where my line was. Because I think a lot of people don't have a clear definition, or maybe any definition, or they think they do, but it's not really crystal clear and sharp as to where their line is. And then having that and knowing that, and then, so having good physical health and all this, I think really helped. And then having a good support network too. Like I said, our handyman and all that stuff, since he was an ex-cop, he spent a long time just talking with us, and just, because he's had to deal with all that stuff himself. And that was a huge help. We talked with the deacon at our church. That helped a whole lot. And just having a lot of you really find out who your friends are, because they will come out of the woodwork and be there to support you
or abandon you. And
that was
depending.
The best thing.
Or potentially abandon you, depending on their point of view. The world's full of them.
But I'm very thankful that most people, as far as I know, people were extremely supportive, and if you will, they were there for me, and so I'm thankful for those people.
Sure. Before we close, I just want to I just want to say this.
Sure.
I have immediate family members who have autistic children, some of whom are very large, some of whom are going to be adults soon. I have some of my best friends have an autistic son who is a very big kid and can be violent and aggressive sometimes. When we do a badge cam on the main channel, the police officer is confronted with someone who wants to commit what's called suicide by cop. And we all know what that means. So that person is going to, if they mean it, they're going to press the officer or officers and press them until they absolutely have to shoot. And you're like, even if that's what they're doing, even if they're yelling, kill me, there becomes a point when your hand is forced. You don't have any alternative. Even if you'd have known, okay, this is autistic guy from across the street, that wouldn't have made any difference, because you were the last line of defense between you and your wife and your children. And if he got past you, odds are a bad thing would have happened to them. It doesn't make this the deceased bad or evil or whatever. It just is what is. And we talk about this on the channel as well. There are various levels of outcomes, from very good to very bad. This is a bad outcome. Doesn't mean it was a bad shoot. I don't think, judging from what you've told me, you had a lot of other options. There wasn't any plan B to deal with a very large, very aggressive, very agitated person with whom you probably couldn't even begin to communicate, who comes through your door out of the blue. I just don't see what else you could have possibly done. I'm sorry this happened to you, John. I'm sorry for his family. I'm sorry for you and your family, because it just sucks. But I think you're incredibly brave to come on the show and talk to us about it. I think I've learned a few things, things that I hadn't considered before we spoke. And so, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we part ways?
If anything, I guess I would just, want to reiterate to anyone listening what I had said. Like, make sure you're the aftermath is a big thing, right? We all love spending time going to, gun school, learning how to shoot and all this stuff. And that's all really fine and good. But that happens in an instant, right? And we also may spend a lot of time focused on like the things leading up to it, like, whether it be, situational awareness or, muck skills or whatever it may be, right? But there's not as much consideration going into the aftermath of things and what it takes, because the aftermath then is the rest of your life. And that could be a mighty long time. And so I would really want to strongly encourage people to have consideration about what that aftermath is, or what that could be, because if you sit there and think, well, whatever this is, I'm going to just, anyone comes into my house, I'm going to shoot him. It's like, well, is that really the right thing? Because think about what that could mean. Have you really thought this through and what that could mean for the rest of your life? You end up like not realizing that it was, your kid stumbling through the house in the dark, and then you shoot your child, and now you got to live with that the rest of your life, right? Having more consideration and thought about aftermath, what it takes to go through it, having some way of being able to legally manage that, whatever, organization or group you may want to deal with, having, understanding where your line is drawn. and so that you can end up managing that. All of these things. Making sure that you're, if you will, that that you've got ways that you can support yourself well by that, whether it's through friends or through church or through whatever it may be. Being able to have and know that you have that in place so that you can manage through and not have to go through this alone. And not being afraid as well with that, to admit if you need help and reach out and get it, even with a professional or whatever it is. That there's nothing to be ashamed about in that. There's nothing wrong with that. If you need the help, you need the help. We'd rather you get through that. So I just would want to encourage people. I mean, I know that like gun school is all fun and talking about aftermath, that there's nothing sexy or interesting or like cool about that. But it's a big thing. It's a serious thing, and like I said, it's going to be with you the rest of your life. So it's well worth making sure that all the other things that you're doing are taking that into account.
We talk all the time on the channel about spiritual fitness, and you kind of just described it to a T. Having told everyone in your life that you love them, that you care about them, don't leave anything unsaid, because you just don't know when the day is going to come when you may have another chance to say those things, to offer that forgiveness, to tell someone you care about them, to check in on a loved one. John, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and you have my email, so anything you need, hit me up. Take care, my friend.
I will do. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hey friends, this is John Correa. If you like the podcast, if it is bringing you value, do me a favor. Just rate the podcast and leave us a rating and a review. It really helps us out.
All right, folks, you know what time it is. We're back again with Steve Gutowski for this week's installment of the Gutowski Files. Steve is the founder of TheReload.com and host of the Weekly Reload podcast. And right up front, I want to say, listen, it's that time of year. We're giving gifts. Give the gift of the Weekly Reload newsletter to a friend, to a loved one. Give them good information. Go over to the Weekly Reload, to TheReload.com rather, and give the gift of good information. Stephen, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. They also get the Weekly Reload podcast a day early if they buy a membership. So it is a wonderful gift. I mean, I might be biased on this, but I do believe that it is a fantastic gift.
And the Weekly Reload podcast, as you know, the second best podcast in the world, in my opinion.
What about the episode where we had you on? Did that not rise?
Well, that was the
level of number one.
That was definitely the best episode of the Weekly Reload podcast, for sure. Anyway, folks, go over to the reload.com and check that out. This week we have several stories that all kind of blend together in theme regarding the governors of two of the best states in the union, Florida and Texas. First of all, the governor of Florida, Ron Desantis, is signaling support for permitless carry, and this is a thing that seems to be catching on. As a casual observer, that permitless carry is becoming more and more popular across the country. So, that article is written by Stephen Gutowski. Check that out at the reload.com. Talk to us about this signaling support.
Yeah, so he was asked directly about whether or not he would sign a bill to put permitless carry into law if it made it to his desk. And he said, of course. And when I followed up with his press secretary, she said that he stood by those comments and that at the same time, he still needs to see actual legislation, text of legislation, before he can commit to anything. The legislative session there in Florida starts next month. So you're likely to see some sort of proposal on permitless carry in that legislature, because the Senate Majority Leader has already signaled support for it, and now the governor has. So it doesn't make it a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely the signs are there that Florida may be the next red state to pursue this particular policy.
So for those who don't, because I assume we have some listeners who don't understand the intricacies of permitted and permitless carry, what does that mean to a resident of Florida if this does end up becoming a law that you can have permitless carry? Does that mean they can just grab a gun, throw it in a holster, conceal it, and walk around all day long? Are there, for example, walking into a bank or a liquor store or whatever, those are things that I think people don't give a lot of thought to before this sort of thing. So I assume the law, if it is introduced and passed and signed, would address all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think in most cases, what you see is those sorts of restrictions on where you can carry, like sensitive areas, which obviously vary a bit state to state. Some states don't let you carry in restaurants that serve alcohol, for instance. Some don't let you carry in places of worship, while others do. But generally, those restrictions tend to stay in place when you have permitless carry come in. All it really means is that as long as you can possess a gun legally, you can carry it legally. You don't have to go and get a permit beforehand. And that's usually how it works out. And this is almost always in regards to constitutional carry, or sorry, constitutional carry is another name for it. That's the what activists call permitless carry. But it's almost always in regards to concealed carry, because actually most states already have permitless open carry. But
Right.
but before very recently, actually, the last decade or so, most states either required a permit to conceal carry or just didn't allow you to do it at all. And now we've moved to a place where, at least in theory, every state has a permit for it. There's some way that you could legally conceal carry a gun. And now 21 states don't even require you to obtain a permit beforehand, as long as you can, again, legally possess the gun in the first place. This doesn't mean that if you are a felon, right, convicted felon, or somebody who's otherwise prohibited from owning firearms, that you can carry them around legally, because it would still be illegal for you to even possess the gun in the first place, right? But for everyone else, you wouldn't have to worry about a situation where, for instance, if you're transporting your gun around and maybe you put it in your glove compartment. In some states, that would be considered concealed carrying, and if you're doing it without a permit, that could be illegal.
Right.
And so that's a circumstance where this sort of reform would have an impact. But yeah, usually those restrictions on where you can take your gun still apply.
Another article up on the Weekly Reload is by contributing writer Jake Fogelman, and the article title is Poll: Texas Governor Greg Abbott holds huge lead over Beto O'Rourke in election and on gun policy. You know, I'll never understand why anyone running for statewide office or for Senate or for the House from the state of Texas would run on an anti-gun platform. It's like running for governor of Kansas on an anti-agriculture platform. It doesn't make any sense. Texas is a place where people have a lot of guns, and they guard their gun rights jealously. But for some reason, Beto O'Rourke seems to think that this is a winning formula. Talk to us about that. I have to assume that Beto O'Rourke has never even come close to Greg Abbott in any kind of a poll for the gubernatorial race in Texas, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I believe he was within 6 points in the last poll that we wrote about. So that's not completely out of the realm of possibility, certainly. No. However, in this poll from Quinnipiac University, which is one of the top pollsters in the country, they found Abbott with a 15-point lead over Beto, which is obviously a really big lead. And then when it came to gun policy specifically, people in Texas preferred Abbott by 60% to Beto at 33%. So that's a 27% spread there, which is pretty huge, as you can imagine. So at least, it's still very early in this race. Beto hasn't even technically won the primary yet, and maybe there'll be somebody who comes along to challenge him in a serious way for that race that is a bit better suited perhaps for the gun politics of Texas. But right now, his bet on doubling down on his confiscation declaration from the presidential primary that he ran in is not paying off so far. I think that's suffice it to say. And then Jake took a deeper look at this in a members only piece, where he talked about how the election actually turned out last year, because there was a significant push by gun control advocates in Texas's elections in 2020. They spent a lot of money, and they tried to get candidates to run on, and did get candidates to run on gun control, and it didn't work out well for them in that case. And now you have Beto sort of doubling down on this same strategy and hoping for a different results. And at least from what we see right now, it's not working out.
So, folks, if you don't remember, not too long ago, he was running for president to be on the ticket for the presidency for the Democratic Party, and he made very, very clear statements, very unambiguous statements, that he not only wanted to ban all AR-15s or AK, variants or whatever, but he wanted to come and take them from you. It was a pretty crazy claim for him to make, and especially
he said directly, "Hell yeah,
yeah,
we're going to take your AR-15s and your AK-47s." That's the direct quote of what he said during that primary. And he went. This was after he'd fallen tremendously in the polls, and so he was perhaps trying to shake things up by going out on a limb there. But he actually went down to 0% in one poll shortly after that, and then he dropped out.
Good.
So, yeah.
That's a pretty insane thing to say. In any state. Terrible.
He
political
stands by it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. That's all the time we have for this week, folks. As I said earlier, please go over to thereload.com, and consider getting a membership for yourself, and consider gifting one to a loved one this holiday season. Stephen, thank you so much for being on this week. We'll see you next week, God willing.
Absolutely.